Just when we thought Oda was done surprising us, he has given us a brand new faction within the Marines, the secret unit known as SWORD. One of the objectives behind SWORD is to partake in undercover missions to monitor Yonko activity. As of right now, we've only learned about two characters who are part of this group. Diaz Drake, a supernova among the worst generation, who is also the captain of SWORD, and Colby, who was recently promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral. These two have just found themselves in a new role within the story that could play a major factor in the Marines' outlook moving forward. But first we have to come to an understanding of the origins behind this faction, and I might have an idea of who is among them as brothers in arms. So let's get right into it. The origins behind SWORD. In chapter 956, it was revealed that Diaz Drake was still a member of the Marines, who we all thought had broken ties with the Navy when he left his post as Rear Admiral way back when. That wasn't the case, as he is now the captain of this new faction. For a while we assumed that Drake's true ties weren't with Kaido, but to someone else. And with his namesake being that of Sir Francis Drake, one of the most important figures in pirating history, parts of his namesake's known feats could very well find its way into the story. But before that, some important questions have been asked regarding SWORD. Who is in this group? What are they after, and why were they formed? So let's tackle the first question and list people who could be a part of SWORD. And after looking back at both Fishman Islands and Punk Hazard, there's a good chance that among their forces is the former admiral turned vagabond, Kuzan. The most important reasoning that could support Kuzan being a part of SWORD comes from the Punk Hazard arc. After preventing Doflamingo from killing Smoker, the Heavenly Yakusha had asked Kuzan, "What exactly have you become? Just which side are you on now?" with the rumors he had heard that don't paint the former admiral in a good light. Along with saying that he is no simple wanderer, given that he has made up his mind about something for him to make a face like that. Kuzan's talk with Smoker adds more to it, stating that he never thought of the world government as the end-all be-all. Being independent of the Navy allowed him to see things more clearly about the world, and he can accomplish these things without having to be affiliated with them. Now, the contradiction to Kuzan being part of SWORD is that he would have to be technically affiliated to them, despite it being a unit separate from the Navy. However, if he were to serve as a senior advisor or a broker for the group, it would then justify him working with SWORD but not having a true affiliation to the Marines. And it really depends on how you view the conversation between Kuzan and Smoker looking back at Punk Hazard. The manga depicts Kuzan in what seems to be the very end of his talk with Smoker when he says, "I'm just me, Smoker." To which the Vice Admiral replied, "Fine then," with his eyes darkened out. Leading up to it, you can see what feels like a transition in time with the panels, not to mention that Smoker's speech bubble before Kuzan comments could hint that he had just finished hearing what Kuzan had to say before his closing comment. For me, this says that Oda kept the truth from the reader and we're only seeing the end result of their talk, which could also explain why Smoker isn't overreacting to what he had just heard. Knowing what we know of Kuzan being allied with the Blackbeard pirates, that in and of itself is a literal suicide mission. The very second he slips up, his life is in peril. Jesus Burgess had told Teach back in Dressrosa that Kuzan was not to be trusted, having been a former dog of the Marines. Any person that allows a former Navy into their ranks has to keep optimistic of their new recruit in the likelihood of their betrayal. It makes even more sense to what Doflamingo had to say about Kuzan making up his mind about something to give a face like that. Similar to the position that Drake is in currently, both he and Kuzan could find themselves with problems if their covers are blown. For Drake, it wouldn't surprise me if Kaido were to accept this, given that he is someone who desires to start the greatest war this planet has ever seen. The more the merrier if the Marines get involved in what he is planning. Where in Kuzan's case, Blackbeard might not be that accepting of any snakes in his system, and one wrong move could mean the end for the former admiral. If in fact Kuzan is the true leader of this faction, he'd want to enlist people that are still within the Marines that keep him posted on the activities they and the world government are conducting. He wouldn't have to be the leader, as Drake is the current captain of the faction, but given that at one point in time that he was their senior, they could view him more as like a founder, similar to how Metal Gear Solid, when you have Big Boss who had founded Foxhound, only for Liquid to end up taking the reins shortly afterwards. So working in a senior advisor role, broker, how I mentioned before, would make the most sense, or at least in a founder role for Kuzan to have some kind of ties with them. So having given why I think Kuzan being a part of SWORD makes sense, who else fills the roster? And I would have to think that this group might not be that big in numbers, it might be more quality over quantity, so we shouldn't expect too many people in it. And it would have to be characters that we know of that fill some of the traits that a member of SWORD could possess. If I had to theorize on some people who will be among them, I like the idea of Garp being a part of SWORD. It would clear up some of his flip-flopping motives that have been quite ambiguous to the reader over the course of the story. And as with Whitebeard, I'm of the mindset that Garp knows what went down during the voice injury through his talk with Gold Roger just before the latter's execution. Say that he denied all the chances to be promoted to Admiral, not just because of his dislike for celestial dragons or the responsibilities that come with it, because of the fact that he was already occupied with his work in Sword. Envision him knowing that he couldn't live with knowledge of their crimes and partook in the creation of this group. It would at least clear up some of the decisions that he had made over the years and why he never took up a higher rank. Another candidate would be Fujitora, given that he is fairly new within the Marines, having been a part of their world draft to fill the 2 admiral positions that were left vacant. He has shown traits that would fit what Sword could represent. Of course, what little we know of his past, he had intentionally blinded himself after witnessing the evil and corruption in the world, and his recent goal of the warlord system's abolishment had finally came into fruition. Fujitora being a part of Sword would align with his ideals of wanting to rid any corruption or evil that plagues the world that the Navy or world government turns a blind eye against. And speaking of potential members, the final name that comes to mind is someone who is in the same generation as Diaz Drake, that person being our very own Surgeon of Death, Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. At first I thought, there's no way, right? But then I had a sudden realization. Although we know of what happened in Law's life from his flashback, there is a period of time between after Corazon's death to the fateful arrival of the supernovas of Salvaodi that is completely empty. If you take the novels as canon material, in Law's novel, the Heart Pirates were formed after Law saved Beppo from being bullied by Sachi and Penguin, which correlates with what Oda had previously stated in SBS of how they all met, so that part we know is true. And they spent a period of time alongside a man named Wolf, an inventor who lived on Swallow Island that took care of the boys. If the novel is rendered non-canon, that leaves a massive period of Law's life after the events of Manion Island up in the air. The part of how his crew was formed is in fact true, but everything else after that could be up for debate. So I have an idea that could convince this belief that Law could be working as a member of Sword. Law was aware of Corazon working as a double agent for both Doflamingo and the Marines. It is true that Law hates the world government for how they left Flavans to burn, which he lost his family and friends in that incident, along with having the person he cared about the most had his life taken by a pirate and more importantly, a celestial dragon. These events in Law's life could have led to him wanting to follow in his guardian's footsteps to destroy the world government from the inside. To this day, I've always felt that something was up between Law and Diaz Drake back in their meeting in Salvaodi. Putting aside their titles as supernovas, it felt like the two of them were somewhat aware of one another. They've been indirectly connected since the events of Minion Island, Drake ending up in the custody of the Marines, whereas Law ended up escaping from Doflamingo. Not to mention, as recently in Wano, we saw Law make a move on his own and wanted to keep the Alliance out of it. Drake's behavior during Hawkins' interrogation of Law was deemed rather odd, and if the person who actually rescued Law was in fact Drake, which we should assume by now, it would make sense now why Drake saved him. Not because they're from the same generation, but that they are from the same faction. To add more to how Law can be tied to Sword lies within another person that is from that very faction who was revealed to be in it. It was the Rocky Port incident that saw Law earn his position as a warlord by delivering the hearts of over 100 pirates to the Marines. Colby, who was there during the fiasco, was hailed a hero for his role in this event. The assumption is that he drove off Law, but we do know this, both of them were on that island on that very day. It's not hard to believe that these two could have confronted one another. Or even one better, they discussed the terms of working together in Sword. Given the timeline between these events in the story, had Law become a member of Sword, there might have been a man within their ranks looking to meet up with him originally at Punk Hazard before he saw Luffy, that person possibly being Kuzan. We know that Kuzan was on his way to Punk Hazard, but the true reason for it was still up in the air. Was he really there to meet up with Smoker? Given that Law was stationed in Punk Hazard working with Caesar Clown, he could have originally went there to discuss sword-related business with them. And if that is the case, the Rocky Port incident might have been a front for the true event that took place there, the creation of Sword, a group consisting of people that seek the same thing, change. The world government is filled with the same evil and corruption that Fujitora speaks of. The current predicament of the Marines is sullied by both Akainu's views of justice and the ways of the world government. Sword, consisting of Diaz Drake, Kobe, Helmeppo, Fujitora, Aokiji, and Law, could potentially find themselves in a role that could shape up to be monumental for the future of the Marines. With the Great Cleansing on the horizon and a fleet admiral on edge, the ones who control the world's well-being are brewing a storm that could result in casualties on many ends. This is where Sword could showcase what true justice is as the new upcoming peacekeepers of the world. It might result in clashes with the shield of the world government, Cyberpol Aegis Zero, as a potential threat against them. In the end, Sword were formed as a means to uncover the truth and put the brakes on the world government's biddings. Some are working for personal reasons, others truly seek to put an end to ongoing corruption. But most importantly, they seek the same thing, change. But let me know down in the comment section below, What do you believe is the origins behind Sword? Who do you see being a part of this group? What exactly is their true motives? If you have any other ideas that differ from what I talked about in this video, let me know down in the comment section below. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new here. If you want to be part of the weekly experience when it comes to my coverage of the One Piece manga week in and week out, subscribe if you haven't already. Click on the bell Shandora to stay up to date with everything that goes on the channel. And with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next One Piece video. So, Commodore last signing off. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care.
Going crazy, yeah, we going crazy.